Hello, class, and welcome to Sir Searcher TV, where learning research is made easy. This is your Sir Searcher teacher, Ian, and let's learn research for our daily lives. Today, we will be talking about, or our lesson is about outlining your research proposal. Now, this activity happens when we are already familiar, knowledgeable, and somehow well adept with the different elements of our research process because outlining your research proposal requires requires the researcher certain knowledge and skills on the different elements and processes in research. So as we go through or as we go along with this video lesson, try to analyze or re-examine whether how much knowledge or expertise or skills or probably your level of familiarity with the various components and elements that will be included in outlining your research proposal. All right, so let's get started. So our first question here, class, is what is a research proposal? Now, we have to remember that our research proposal or the format or the way we write our research proposal or the way we structure a research proposal depends on the school, the institution, or the journal that will be sponsoring or publishing your research. So there are various ways on how we structure your research proposal. But in most cases and in almost all scenarios, the elements or the important inclusion of your research proposal are somehow similar. Because this is a proposal, it's like a plan. It's like giving the benefactor or the one who will finance your research, if that is your purpose, the idea on what is your research about, how will you somehow conduct your research, who will be your partner, or who will be not your partner, but who will be your respondents or your samples, and what is the main objective of your proposal or of your research study. So let's get started. So let us first define what is a research proposal. So a research proposal is an offer to produce a research product or render service to the potential buyer or sponsor. Now, remember, class, that in here, we are giving an offer to produce a research product, particularly, oh, sorry. Okay. Okay, particularly to a potential sponsor. No, I would like to say sponsor over buyer because as students, there will be various institutions or probably your school. Okay, in some cases, like if you do a research proposal as a student, you do this for requirement, okay, or academic purposes. All right. Okay, so academics, requirements in your school or in your course. Okay, and the research proposal presents the problem, discuss related research efforts, outlines data used to gather and analyze your data. So basically, guys or class, your research proposal is what I've mentioned a while ago. Give us like an overview, okay? So an overview of your research process. Okay. Because in here, remember that you have to convince your sponsor, or probably in the school or as an academic requirement, you have to convince the panel to give you, the research proponent, the go signal or probably the approval to conduct your study or proceed with your research study. Okay. Another one is that a research proposal is valuable to both the research sponsor and the researcher in such a way that if you are the research sponsor, probably you will be convinced to finance the study or to support the study in any way. Or if in the school, um, that would mean that your research passes or adheres with the research agenda and the research standards of your university or of your college or your school. Okay. And remember that it is also valuable for both the research sponsor and the researcher because there must be an agreement. Yes. So the agreement here would mean that you, as a researcher or the proponent, um, would like to share your vision about the study, and then the sponsor or the panel sees your vision or sees where the study will go and would share that vision with you so that there would be mutual agreement and support coming from both the proponent, the sponsor, and the school. Okay, so that is a definition of your research proposal. Now let's proceed to the components of a research proposal. Now, as what we have said a while ago, your research proposal or the components of your research proposal, regardless of institution, of an academic academic institution, or depending on the organization, it actually kind of varies depending on how you format or you present it, but the components are very similar. The components, it might be that some components might not be included, some might be in there, but the one that we'll be discussing today are the most essential components of a research proposal. Okay. And you should always remember, class, that our research proposal should always begin with a section and the purpose of the research, and which is a brief and but clear statement of the decision, problem, or opportunity as viewed by the management, and that both the overall problem and its implications are emphasized. So, the research gap. Okay, I would like to highlight on that. So, in your proposal, there should be a strong presentation of the research gap. And what is this research gap? Well, basically, your research gap is now your problem to be solved. Okay. So it is called a gap because there are still some missing knowledge or information that your research might be able to provide. And it should begin with that. Or probably it should be highlighted with your research gap. Okay. Now, furthermore, the purpose of the research must be clearly communicated along with the projects and limitations. And more specifically, this section describes the areas of inquiry to be investigated, the project's goals and ideas to be achieved, and the specific research questions or hypotheses to be raised. So, depending on how you um, present or outline your research problem, and just in case there are also if your problems require hypothesis. So since we are already familiar with the one of the most important element of your research proposal, let's now take a look at the specific inclusions. Okay, so the first one here is the purpose of the research project. Now, remember that a researcher's proposal must present the plan, services, and credentials in the best possible way to encourage the proposal selection over competitors. Okay, so remember, class, that there should be, okay, a tangible plan. And when I say tangible, it means it is very specific, not really very specific, but it's specified, it is concrete, not too complex but not too simple as well, and presented in such a way that even Okay, presented in such a way that it doesn't really require, higher order thinking analysis in order for the sponsor or for the panel to figure out what you really wanted to do. Okay, so it should be like that. And remember that because sometimes if you are doing a research proposal for the purpose of selection and probable funding, it must be at par with competitors. Yes. And what do we mean by this? Okay, when you say at par with competitors, it means that your research proposal must be better, or if not the best, among other proposals, so that it will be selected and your study will be the one that will be sponsored or financed by a benefactor. Okay. Now, many students and beginning researchers view the proposal as unnecessary work, but in reality, the more inexperienced a researcher is, the more important it is to have a well planned and adequately documented proposal. The research proposal is essentially a roadmap. Okay, so that is also one thing that we have to remember. So it is a roadmap and the method of getting there. So it sets direction, as what I have mentioned a while ago. So the direction here would also speak about the vision of the research, where it is headed, and how uh, how the objectives will be materialized with a series of plans and actions that you wanted to pursue or conduct. Okay. All right. And a well prepared proposal, also remember, class, that a well prepared proposal includes potential problems that may be encountered along the way and the methods for avoiding or working around them. So that's also being proactive. So I would like to emphasize this also, that your research proposal or the purpose of the proposed research should be proactive. That means you have already identified some difficulties that you might encounter, and in your proposal, you must also include what will be the different strategies or course of action that you will undertake just in case all these problems, hurdles, or challenges may come along the way as you conduct the research study. Okay, now, so let's go specifically on the purpose of the research proposal. And in here, when you state the purpose of your research proposal, this following elements should be present. I mean, these are non negotiable. So you might add more, but you cannot miss all these three important things. So the very first one, oh, sorry. Okay. So the very first one on our list is present the management questions. Okay, so presenting the management questions to be researched and to relate, it's important. The management question here, because, okay, I forgot to tell, the source of our lesson for today is a management research. So technically, it is directed towards any management questions. Or in this case, you can talk about present the research question, the management questions, or technically the research question. Okay, so you have your main objective or your general statement of the problem, then your specific objectives. Okay, or your specific or your statement of the research problem. All right. Also, you have to include discussing, or you have to discuss the efforts conducted by other researchers who have worked on related management questions. So, discussed efforts conducted by other researchers would also mean here relatedness. Yes, relatedness of your proposal to previous studies done. Okay. So relatedness here, class, would mean how is your study similar to the one that to similar questions or similar queries that were done in the past. And remember, it's not just only the similarity, but you have to emphasize what aspect are you going to investigate that was not investigated, or that the aspects that were missed from previous studies. So it's actually more of continuing study or a secondary analysis of a previous study done. And likewise, in here, you have also to present that your study is not repeated. And although you will probably have similar query or similar objective or research problem, but what specific aspect or context are you going to investigate that makes your study unique? So the efforts conducted also would speak about uniqueness. Okay, there you go. Oh, I forgot to put a check here. And the third component, class, is suggest data necessary to solving the management question and how the data will be gathered, treated, and integrated. So obviously, the third portion here of your purpose would also speak about or give an overview of your methodology. All right. So your methodology that would include the collection, okay, and analysis of your data. Oh, and analysis of your data. Okay, there. And a research proposal also, remember this class, allows the instructor or professor in business research particular to assess the sincerity of the students or the researcher's purpose, the clarity of his or her design, the extent of the relevant background material, and fitness for undertaking the research project. Okay. So that those are the important components that you should not miss out when drafting your purpose of the research proposal or the purpose of your research proposal. Okay, so the second component of your research proposal class is the type of study. So in here, we have to identify, or this part of your research proposal includes a discussion of your research methods. Though we have said that the methodology somehow has been presented like an overall on your purpose, okay, but you do not really very go specific, just an overview of how data will be gathered or how will your management questions be answered through the type of data that will be collected and how it will be analyzed. In your type of study, you are now specifically um, focusing on your design. Okay. So on your research design. Now for the research design, please check on the related video because I we have already discussed or here in Story Searcher TV, we have a video lecture on research design. So you might check it out to reinforce or add your knowledge about research design. And in here, in your type of study as well, because we're talking about the research design, we also have to specify what kind of approach are we going to do. Okay, are we going to conduct a quantitative study? Okay, or we're going to conduct a qualitative study. So technically, quantitative study talks about measurable, okay, measurable data, or in a more common sense, quantifiable or numerical data for that matter, while qualitative research are more on narratives. Okay. However, if you as a researcher would like to create a more complex, but not really complex, but if you wanted to add rigor to your research study, you might be also combining the two for a mixed method. Okay, that could also work well in your type of study. Okay, number three is okay here the definition of the target population and sample size. Now, this section clearly defines a specific population under investigation. So you have to note who are your target population. Okay, so the target population here are the people to whom your study is directed towards. So this could be, they could be the benefactors or they could be the source of information. So that could be a two-way. Your target population can be first your respondents where you're going to get your data, or they could be the people or the group of people to whom the results of the study will be used or will be utilized by them. Okay. Now, in here, when you clearly define a specific population under investigation in both descriptive and quantitative terms, the researcher also projects the size of the sample. So we have your population and then we have your sample size. Now, there is also a dedicated video about sampling methods and samples, so you might check that out in the in our channel. Okay, now, but let me just give a little um, overview, or why is it that we still need to get a sample. Remember that in some cases your target population are too large or too vast or really very massive, that getting all the information from each and every member of the population would be impossible. So you have to extract a certain sample size wherein it will represent, because your sample here is a okay, sorry, so your sample here is actually a representative. Okay, it's a representative of your population. All right. So this is a representative of your population. And because they are representative, they would speak in behalf of the entire population where they came from. Okay. Likewise, when you get the sample size, you also have to include the justification of the projection, and at the same time, determining the appropriate sample size is not an easy task. And we also have a separate video for that, so you might check out the channel for the sampling procedure to add additional knowledge on determining the sample size. And why is it a difficult task? Because the researcher must consider how precise the estimates must be and how much time and money are available to collect the required data. So there are certain requirements for your sample size, and you just don't um, determine it according to your own preference. So there must be a lot of considerations. So check out on that video. It's check out on a related video because it will be further discussed. All right. However, in determining your target population and sample size, let us discuss the following factors. Okay, so these are factors that play an important part in determining your sample size. So we've mentioned that it's not an easy task. So we have to consider what um, factors should we include in determining our sample size? And the first one is the variability of the population characteristics. So the variability here, okay, class, for us to understand very well, when we talk about variability of population characteristics, we're talking about heterogeneous attributes. Okay. So let me just get this simply. When you say heterogeneous attributes, we're talking about the different characteristics of your population. So if your population is so diverse, if your population doesn't really share a lot of common characteristics, it is suggested that you must increase your sample size, okay? Because the higher the variability, all right, remember this class, the higher is your sample size as well. So the small letter n is a statistical symbol for sample size. So we might be using that um, in this lecture. Okay, but of course, here I just like to add, in the variability of population characteristics, you might also consider um, okay, we don't have a space, but I'll just put it here. Your inclusion criteria. Okay, your inclusion criteria class. This is also very significant because your inclusion criteria is like a list of characteristics or list of qualities that you wish that you set in selecting your sample size. So, for example, in a total of 10,000 uh, business students or college business students, for instance, um, we can filter them out according to the criteria that you have set. So that is also one way on how you can reduce your population so that you could have a manageable sample size. Okay, the second one is the level of confidence desired. So the level of confidence would be, it comes also with a margin of error, or this is the statistical aspect in determining your sample size, because in this part, or in this factor, we use a sampling formula. So it depends on the uh, type of formula that you will use. So we have your Slovens, or your Imanis. We also have your NAES formula. So really depending on the preference of the institution, which formula you're going to use. And remember that in your sampling formula, you have a confidence desired, or your margin of error. And in here, remember that the higher your level of confidence would also mean that you would have a higher sample size as well. Okay. Because if you have a higher confidence level, your margin of error also decreases. So let's say, for instance, you have, okay, so let's have this. Let's say your confidence level is 95%, your LOC. So your margin of error is at 5%. Okay. But if you are going to have a 2.5% margin of error, expect that you would have a bigger sample size. All right. And finally, the third factor is the degree of precision in estimation the population characteristics. The more precise the required sample results, the smaller and the larger sample size. So this is what I'm talking about on inclusion criteria. So population characteristics, or the characteristics here are your attributes, and it has to be set through your, okay, inclusion criteria. All right, there you have it. It has to be specific, because in market research, in particular, when you gather data, especially if okay, let's say the purpose of your research is to check on the feasibility of a certain product, whether it will be patronized by a certain group of people, or customers. So you need to be specific. What kind of customers are do we really need, or do we um, target our product? So what is our market? So you have to list down the characteristics, and that would help you uh, lessen or filter down your um, sample size, or your population where you will get your sample. Okay, so I think we're done with target population and sample size. Let's proceed to the fourth component, and that is your sampling design technique and data collection method. So sampling, as what we've said, is a complex process. And in market research, specifically, choosing your sample is very critical, because that would also affect the validity and the generalizability of your results. So you have to state how are you going to um, get or obtain your sample. So this section discusses the appropriateness of either using, okay, your probability, we have here probability, or your non-probability sampling. And just an overview, your probability sampling is the random selection. So there is a random selection of your uh, um, sample, and your non-probability is the non-random selection. Okay. So you have to specify. And likewise, if you opt for a certain sampling design technique, it has to be justified as well. Okay. The procedures necessarily to correctly execute the drawing of the sample should be discussed in detail, and also included are discussion that identify and justify the most appropriate research design. Okay. So data collection method, we also mentioned about the design here. Okay, there you go. And of course, we have the last component, and this is the specific research instrument. Okay, so this part discusses specific methods that will be used to collect the data. Okay, so methods of data collection here. Okay, methods, specific methods to collect the data, like, for example, personal interviews, self administered surveys, non-disguised or disguised observation, also known as direct or indirect observations, if you'll get focus groups, discussion, etc. The researcher will discuss the types of data and appropriate scale measurement. There, we have your scale measurement here. So it has to be specified. And just a quick run through or quick review with our measurement, scale measurement, of course. So we have here, your data could either be discrete or continuous, okay? And it could also be nominal, interval, ordinal, or ratio scales. So we will have a separate video lecture in this, so you might check it out in the future. And there are two ways of collecting your data using your questionnaire. Okay, wait, okay, I think I just need to put like a cloud so that this would be, okay. All right, here. So there are two ways of collecting data using questionnaire. So if you wish, or if your data collection is about questionnaire, you can either do a self-administered questionnaire. So from the name itself, self-administered. Okay, wait. Yeah. Okay, so from the name itself, self-administered, it's where the researcher, okay, requires the individual respondent to answer questions without assistance of a proctor. So the questionnaire is mailed or forwarded. So these are, okay, so no proctor. So basically, from the name itself, self-administered, it's mailed to you. So this could be mailed either, you know, postal mail, or because of the new normal and for convenience purposes, this could also be done through uh, email. Okay. And then the questionnaire is then returned, okay, or sent back to the researcher. Now, a group administered questionnaire, on the other hand, requires groups of individuals to fill a questionnaire with the assistance of the proctor. So this is with proctor, okay, who stands for any questions and arises from the respondent. So in here, unlike in your self-administered questionnaires, your respondents may answer the questionnaire depending on their convenience or the time that they, or depending on the opportunity that they could answer. But in your group, altogether, simultaneously, okay? Here, they simultaneously answer your questionnaire. Okay, yes. So I think we covered all the important components of a research proposal. So you have the purpose, then the type of study, your target population and your sample sizes. Then we also discuss about the sampling design technique and data collection method and the specific research instrument. Also, there, I think that's it. Okay, so now, class, we will proceed to the next part, which is the general outline of a research proposal. Okay, so let me restate the previous statement. Okay, that's very quite redundant, but let me emphasize one more time that the outline of a research proposal varies from institution to institution, and it really depends on the review board of a certain institution, on their preference of how a research proposal is outlined. So you may check on the link, you may check on the captions the link for a sample um, outline of a research proposal, specifically in market research. Okay, so let's talk about the different parts. So what are we going to expect in the different parts? Since the components have already been discussed, we will translate those different components in the parts of your research proposal. So let's begin with the title of the research proposal. So this is really very important. Okay, your research title. Now, For your title class, it has to be brief. Okay, just a quick characteristics of your title. So it should be brief. It should include all important variables, and it should be interesting. Okay. Why? Because a research proposal or the title of a research proposal is the first thing that the sponsor, the panel will see, and that would create the first impression whether they would like your proposal or not. So you have to make sure that you draft a very striking title of the research proposal. Also, we will be posting, or I'm sorry, not posting, but a separate lecture has been dedicated in writing your research proposal. So you may check the channel um, for your reference. Okay, now let's take a look at the different parts or the outline. So number one, of course, we have here the purpose of the proposed research project. So clear expression of the decision, problem, information, research problem, and specific research objectives. Then we have also the type of study we mentioned there a while ago. So your research design is here. Okay. So whether it's exploratory, descriptive, causal, or secondary versus primary data requirements, of course, with justification of choice. Number three is a definition of the target population and sample size. So that's where you put it there. A substantial discussion regarding the sampling technique, as what we have said, that used to draw the required sample and the actual method of collecting data, whether you're going to do survey, observation, experiment. Likewise, you also need for number four, sample design technique and data collection methods. So here, a substantial discussion regarding sampling technique used, uh, yes, to draw the required samples. Also, incentive plans and justification. Also, for your number five is your specific research instrument, method used to collect the needed raw data, discussion of the various type of scale and measurement requirements. So we have covered that a while ago. Your number six, okay, sorry for that. Your number six is your potential managerial benefits. Okay, so we haven't covered this, so I would like to explain a little bit more on this one. So potential managerial benefits of the proposed study, discuss the expected, okay, here class, remember this, expected values. Okay, expected values of the information, expected values of the info to management, and how the how the problem might be resolved there. So in a regular, or in your, if probably familiar with the research outline, this is already like your significance of the study. Okay, so yeah, so your potential managerial benefits would actually talk about the significance, okay, of the study. So that's how you're going to discuss that. Your number seven is also important, and this is now your cost structure or your cost estimates. Okay, now it depends on where you're going to submit your proposal. But if the purpose of your proposal is for sponsorship, you have to take note, or you have to present how much will it take for the study to be completed. So everything from uh your materials, okay, if you're going to, okay, so what okay, I'll just write it here. So what will be the coverage of your cost structure? Okay, conducting the research project that includes okay, all your materials, mhm, your operational expense, all right? Then if you have, your product or your intervention, okay? And likewise, if you will be needing, uh, let's say, of course, that's already your operational expenses, the transportation, and if there will be participatory fees to your from your participants or your respondents, so you might include it in there. Okay. Likewise, in a proposed cost structure, it is also important that you have to put here your time frames, mhm, or your Gantt chart. Okay, like what is your target date for the study to be completed, and what are the expected activities before reaching that target date for study completion? So it has to be included in there. And finally, your number eight, it's the profile of the researcher and the company. So it's like a curriculum vitae, or um, presenting uh, probably your credentials to the sponsoring organization so that they may be convinced more to, you know, fund your research. Likewise, they would have the idea of your research background, and somehow they would set the expectation for the proposal of the study as well. So if you put there a really research oriented background, that might be a plus factor, because you know the sponsors may be impressed and they will be more convinced to fund your study. Okay, so these are the common outline class of your research proposal in a marketing or management research, but in some institution they might add some or they might remove some, so it really depends. Just take note of these, and this would really help you with your proposal, and hoping that it will be get approved in the future. Okay. So if you have any questions or if you have clarifications regarding our discussion for today, don't hesitate to comment down below. I will be entertaining all your questions, and probably if there are some clarifications or there are disputes, or if you really don't agree with what we have discussed, I can make a separate video for that in the future. So once again, this is your Sir Searcher Teacher Ian saying thank you and class dismissed.